Well, hello everyone. We're having a laugh here about how sometimes we do things instinctively and sometimes we don't. And then again, there's the issue of, are we being instinctive or are we being intuitive? And what's the difference between the two? So we're talking about instinct and whether or not our instincts have a voice and whether or not we pay attention to that voice and what can happen when we don't, or indeed when we do. So let's introduce everyone. So Tanys, you've been missing in action for a while, so we're going to say hello to you first and let you tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been new projects happening. So I'm Tanys Coughlan from Twillo Lifestyle Community. That's my business. I help people with their spiritual path, and I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada.
Do you see me?
Yes, I did.
Here though. Thank
See,
you, Leslie.
instinctively, he's blocking me out.
In Tony's defence, you did break up a little bit, as you said,
Yeah,
Tony.
I couldn't hear.
You did. You
Just
broke
had
up a
the
bit. Yeah.
Ah, I was not
Okay.
aware of my breaking up.
Hey, thank you, Leslie. My name's Tony Gordon. My company's Change Your Mind Limited. I work mostly with entrepreneurs who are in business about 18 months, 2 years, and get to the point where they don't know whether they want to keep going or giving up. So they lose a bit of passion, they lose their drive. So I just help them to reignite that passion again, find their purpose in life again, and then move forward. So thank you.
Okay, Mammy, here we go.
I am Mary Corbett and I am in Cork in Ireland, and I coach individuals who get stuck. They get the new job, they get the big promotion, and then they can't land on their feet. And they're swamped and overwhelmed. And I love working with them because I help them fly. That's me.
Angela.
So I'm Angela Daye from Inner Pathways, and I work with a whole range of clients who just need that little bit of help to prioritise themselves and remember that they are just as important as everybody else in their lives. So whether it's setting goals, taking actions, or overcoming limiting beliefs and building confidence, it's about living the life that you want, your way, your terms. And I do that with kinesiology and coaching.
And I'm Leslie Marsh, basically. Yeah. And I am at the moment focusing on businesses and organizations that want to align their situations with the idea that they can have a culture of nurture in their businesses and they can actually not just on paper listen to the people who actually want to speak and want to be heard, but actually hear them and then do something about it. So that's it, really. And we're going to be talking about instinct. What's everybody's idea about instinct anyway? Mary?
I was having a think about this in the last few days, and I realized that I don't really know. Because I was brought up to prioritize learning and everything else I learned, and that the idea of instinct was not actually in my history, my family, perceived to be a good thing. So it wasn't something that was emphasized of just having a gut instinct. And yet, I would be very aware that when I'm coaching, stuff bubbles up. I can't explain where it comes from. And my sense is that is either my instinct or intuition or something. All I know is I've learned to trust it. And when that stuff bubbles up, I run with it. And that's
Well, I
where I'm at.
actually, when we were talking before we started and everybody was coming in and I said I was brushing up on this, I actually looked it up. And I looked up the psychology idea behind it. And it says instinct, an inborn impulse to action, typically in response to specific external stimuli. Today, generally described as a stereotyped, apparently unlearned, genetically determined behaviour pattern. And the Oxford, that was a noun, and as an adjective, it's imbued or filled with a quality, especially a desirable one. These canvases are instinct with passion. I have never heard it used that way before. Never
No, me
heard it
neither.
used that way before. But it's amazing what you can find on Wikipedia or Wiki Dictionary, whatever it is.
I do remember back in the day I was told not to use Wikipedia as a source for anything related to anything.
Well,
So
I
my
did
research
lie. That
wasn't.
was the Oxford English Dictionary. So, you know.
Yeah, so my research was a little less dry. So I got that instinct is a biological response, and that it's hardwired into our brains. So it's a bit of your fight or flight, and actually it's that instinctive response. It's
Yeah.
not thought. It's just you just do. It's about survival.
It's your lizard brain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tanys.
Yeah, that's what I would say instinct is about that automatic response. So, you know, you burn yourself, and that, you know, some people have the automatic response to swear. That would be like an instinct.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You pull your hand away. That would be instinctual, as opposed to, you know, actually tuning into things, which would be more your intuitive side, or reacting to other stimuli around you.
Interestingly enough, swearing is known to be a painkiller.
That is true.
Well, you do. It is a release of energy.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Definitely.
Is it the choice of word, or is it the emphasis and the gumption with which you use the swear word?
Oh, I think it's got to be the emphasis and the gumption. I think it's got to be, because that's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
It's a real outward push
It's that
of,
guttural.
you know, it's that real, you know, lizard brain, reactive kind of, oh my, beep, beep, beep. And,
Yeah.
you know,
You're releasing negative energy, aren't you, when you swear?
Yeah.
Or, you know, it's getting rid
Yeah,
of that
yeah.
negative side of you to allow the positive side to come in.
and you know, they say that curses work faster than blessings because basically the amount of energy that's behind them.
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
Theoretically, you could just yell out sweary words, and that works too.
Yes.
You
Yes.
could.
Tony.
I think I'm sort of the opposite of Mary. I think that I was brought up to trust my gut instinct, because I think where I grew up, I grew up, and I used to joke with a lot of people, a wee quiet place in Glasgow called Easterhouse. So I grew up there in the late 60s, early 70s when it was at its height.
So quiet.
So going from well, my description when I lived in South was it was a quiet little fishing village in the east coast of Scotland, and everybody believed me. But it was one of those areas.
Really not.
It's really not.
It's a tough housing estate for Tanys, not really that, really, but tough. At that time, the late 60s, early 70s, the gangs ruled the place rather than the people. So when you go from one place to another, you had to trust your own gut where you felt safe enough to go, even as a young child, going between schools or going between your house and school. So we always get brought up with that. But then you made a really valid point, because when the instinct kicked in, if something wasn't right, it was like a mechanical response, because it wasn't the instinct that you got, it was the feeling or the sense that something wasn't right, something was foreboding,
Right.
and then this reaction came in. So that was more of a mechanical response to a sense or feeling that I had before that, maybe a foreboding or something that was good. You get a feeling this is going to be okay, so I can go there. So I think it's that we get the feelings or emotions first of all, and then it's something that's in us. But you think about it, because when we talk about instinct, all this comes from when humans were first up against like the dinosaurs or that era, when they were in danger. So the instinct was supposedly to deal with the dangers there, but they were short-lived dangers, because it was either getting away from a predator or maybe a rival or that. But nowadays, there's so much more. It's not as quick when you're dealing with something. So is it more intuition nowadays then than it is instinct?
Well, it's true that we're only born with two instinctive reactions, and that's the fear of falling and loud noises.
Mm-hmm.
So the rest of it, we've had to learn some way or other. And it's probably been one of those things like, I don't know, when elephants learn where all the water holes are and where the routes are to get to them, it's passed down from the matriarch all the way down to the children, the baby elephants, the calves, that's what they're called. And basically, it's one of those things again, it's that you said the word foreboding.
Mm-hmm.
Now, foreboding for me is definitely an intuitive word. because what you are foreboding about might not be what someone else is fearful of.
Yep.
You know, but it's also, yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, we somehow have this graphic way of looking at the world. And I'm thinking, you know, like when Ig and Og were out there doing the hunting and they're looking and they're watching the wolves do their stuff. The instinct is to not kill the wolves, but say, how could we use that? You know, so I think that there's an intuitive part and there's I mean, that's what stories are for, isn't it, Mary?
I think it is, but there's something else that's coming up for me. Is I think that we, you know, in a sense, when we talk about the fear, as most people say, we can have an instinctive fear of danger, fear. But, you know, we also have this instinctive need. There's our social skills is instinctive, that we reach out to others, that we reach out to learn. That's instinct as well. That desire. So I think there's a lot more. It's more complex. You know, it isn't that the negative bits are instinct and the nice bits are intuition. I don't, you know, I think there's a greater complexity there, that we have instincts to learn as well, which I think is, and I think some of the you know, various authorities, when they're writing their research articles, will put about, you know, having us 4, 5, 6, 7 core instincts that we come with, whereas I don't know whether we actually, and I think this comes back to the bit that Tony was talking about, in part when we have an environment that we grow up in, our environment and our instincts, they mesh together so quickly, so immediately from day one, just like the elephant, that it's often very hard to distinguish between what's learned and passed down and what is actually instinct. I think it's very hard to identify what is pure instinct.
Yeah, because it could be just genetic memory. Well, I say just genetic memory. That's a quite big subject in itself. But
well, I was going to say on that point, I don't know if I agree with the fact that we only had 2 fears, because that genetic memory, your mother's fears through the maternal line are passed down through the womb. So you are born with a lot of that inbuilt garbage, for want of a better word.
I have read that arachnophobia is actually passed from the mother to the baby in the womb.
Absolutely.
I think it's more like they're saying is that majority, or as people, as in human beings, we're only born with the 2. But obviously everybody's individual, so we could have other things passed to us, but everybody's born with those 2. That's the thing it was saying, is that everybody has the 2 of them, but other people can have other ones depending yet on the lines of their parents and that where they've come from. So genetically, they'll have other ones, but everybody has those 2.
Okay, I'll take that one. Although in saying that, as babies, do we care about falling? Because when we're learning to walk, how many times do we fall down? Is it a fear?
We have a fear of that fear is incredibly young, because if you give depth perception experiments on very young babies, as in ones barely starting to crawl, they will not go over clear glass. So they have an automatic fear, and they did a whole series of studies back in the 60s in California on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and one of the things you think as well is that when it comes to that, see, when you look at these little gates that they have on stairs and everything, they're only a certain height for that reason, because children won't go any higher than that anyway. They don't have to have it full, because a child will not go that height and go over it, so they can't fall over it to fall down. It's just to stop them getting through it initially. So they'd have that. There is a fear there, and you think when they're crawling around as well, rather than standing and falling, they do, when you first start seeing them starting to walk, it is a fear of falling over. They also may find a way of landing somewhere softer as much as possible, but there is something in that they do that. And loud noises is something, because you do detect that right away, even with a child.
My sister, when my mother wasn't in the room, went belting up and down the living room, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And the next day she forgot how to do it. She somehow got the thoughts together in her head, or the just the impulsive like instinct to say, like, they're all walking, I should be able to do this too, kind of thing. But there's no thought process in that. It's a case of
copying.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah, just copying something.
It's just copying something. But then either her legs were so sore after the exercise the day before, or it was a case of she was a little bit lazy, or she just forgot how to do it completely. She says she forgot how to do it.
Or there was a
Who knows?
benefit for her to not be able to get up and climb or walk, and people came to her rather than her having to go to them. Or she got more attention.
Not in our house.
Could be.
But
But attention
maybe
can be good or bad.
the instinct in our house was let the baby cry. Or give it something to cry for. So, you know, that was the kind of instinct. But that's another thing. It's a case of definitely your environment as well breeds, I think, instinctive responses. So you get to know, and I think it's got a lot to do with your universal mind in making strategies for protection, self-protection, and self-awareness. Tanys, what do you think?
Yeah, so it sounds like that's, you know, that would be related to triggers then, right? Too, when you're talking about that. And what's the connection? We have brain cells in our stomach, in our heart, and in our head. So is there a connection there that if it's in the gut, that's instinct? And then if it actually makes it up to the heart, does that make it intuition? Because then you're feeling it a little bit more, right? You're feeling into that a little bit more. So perhaps, I mean, in Tony's example, he was talking about it being a gut instinct. So that's usually like an initial kind of, but I feel that if it's a gut instinct and you instinctively do it without, like you just do it without any pause, then that might be instinct. But I think that sometimes we get a gut instinct about something and then we make a choice to do something about it. I think if there's a choice in there, that might be the difference between instinct and an intuitive choice. So
yeah,
it could be either.
Also, here's a third one. What about habit?
Mm-hmm.
Instinct can become an habitual thing, or an habitual thing can be looked on as an instinct. Because if you instinctively reach for the same thing every time when certain stimuli is happening, is that not just a habit in some cases? Unless, of course, it's something that's going to save your life or something like that.
Yes,
So maybe the
difference
might be that thought process then, because when we do a habit, we're not putting a thought into it, we're just doing it. Whereas if we get an intuition, we have to go through the thought process of, do I want to follow this intuition? So maybe the thought process is one of the factors in the difference between the two.
Going to say something, Angela?
Yeah, no, I was just saying it depends on what you're actually meaning in defining as habit. Is it an automatic response? Is it muscle memory? Is it learned behaviour? What's actually going on? Whereas the instinct is a response to an external stimuli. What's happened? How am I going to respond to it? Without necessarily going into great deal of thought process, it's a very quick instinct. And it is that, right, okay, this has happened, I've got to do something. Whereas the habit might just go, oh yeah, whenever that happens, this is how we respond. So I think it's maybe a bit of a slower response, whereas I think instinct is I'm very much now. Ow, that hurt, that was hot, I'll take my hand away.
Mm-hmm.
In a
Yeah,
sense,
not going to do that again.
In a sense, it's where our instincts are reactive, whereas our intuitions are responsive.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I was wondering more if the instinct isn't external stimuli and intuition's an internal stimuli. So something that's external happening then triggers an instinctive response, whereas it's something that's inside. It's that sense of knowing, that feeling, that gut sense of whether it's gut or not, but that I just know this. I don't know why I know it. I don't know how I know it, but I know it. Might not trust it, might not follow it. There's something in there that I know.
It's a bit like Mary was saying earlier, when she's got a client and you don't know when this happens or why you're going to go a certain way, but we all do that. We go it. And I had an incident with this recently. It was a really weird incident, but it was a lady in Australia that contacted me that had been on a network thing or something. And she had a feeling that she needed to speak to me about. And she said, can we arrange a meeting on it? And ironically, we actually come from 7 miles from each other. before Australia, we never knew each other, but lived here. But her thing was that you were talking about there, was that something she'd watched me on something, she said that you block your own intuition at times. You stop your intuition coming through. It's something I'd never thought of, I'd never realised we're in. And it was, when I deal with clients, I deal with a certain way. But maybe it also was a preventive thing, my intuition, not to take too much on. So I don't, as an empath, not taking too many things from other people. It was helping me. But she was saying, no, you need to open up more. And see, when she did that, do a little chakra session with that day. I'd never had them before. Something changed in me. And all the clients I've dealt with since have all said the same thing as what Mary was saying there. How did you pick that up from what I said when no one else has done it? They've all been to other therapists or counsellors, but they come and it's something with something that they've said. And I can't explain that. So is that intuition, or what is that it's like they talk and yet certain words light up in my head and all link together. And then I go, right, I know what it is. I need to get them towards that. So they'll realise the same thing. Is that intuition?
Like you're seeking for different criteria now. You've been opened up. And it's like Mary said, there's a whole load of stuff that goes on that when we're talking to people, instinctively, we will start to listen for the words that we are looking that will provide the stimuli that will make them understand what they're saying and what they're doing and whether the two match or not. And I think that that's also something that we learn to a certain extent, but it's more that we have would you say that Mary, that we have the raw materials to begin with, and it's honing that?
My sense, I think we all have the raw materials. I would question whether it's about honing it, because that would imply that we're learning to recognize it. Whereas I think it might be more we allow it to be released and we allow it to come to the surface, as distinct from, oh, I'm practicing this skill set now. And I have come across over the years coaches who, as I would call them, the ones who follow the models. And they will say, and they're practicing it, but the stuff that's internal, that they could just that just knowing they just come up with the answer. That's not where they're at. They're practicing a model, or they're running with the model. They're honing a skill set in a particular way. Whereas I think what we're talking about is we hear stuff and we get confident or comfortable in our own understanding that, yes, we have a solid body of knowledge behind us. That when stuff surfaces up or just bubbles, we just run with it because we trust it. I don't think everybody does. I think there are lots of people who don't. But I think that really good business leaders do it? Do I think good coaches do it? Do I think there are diagnosticians, say, in the medical practice who use it? Absolutely. So I think there are some who get comfortable. They don't have the need to have to, have I checked the right model or the right piece of paper or the right piece of research? They trust that they enough solidity in them, their own systems. If something comes up, they just run with it. They don't question it. It just comes.
One thing that's funny with that is the way I was describing it in my head is when you said that, Mary, is that intuitively I seem to know what the issue is, even though the client doesn't. But instinctively, I know the next step to take. So it's like the intuition tells me first of all, and then the instinct kicks in as I know what I need to do to get them there. It just seems to come automatic that I do that. I don't overthink. It just seems to be something like they need to go toward this direction. What I need to do is. So is that intuition then leading to instinct?
Well, it's an energetic exchange, isn't it?
Of some description.
Of some description. We're all in our own separate ways working with energetic forces, because we are all energetic beings. And it's the thing that I think it's like the primordial soup that's there is the energy that's around everything. When we're in the womb, we're in this kind of soup where everything that's happening on the outside gets filtered down and percolated in. And that can be why we have certain fears and misgivings when we get older. And we can't understand how we got them until maybe later if we're lucky. But instinctively, because of what that happened then, we have this kind of warning, danger, don't go here. And that's the amygdala that's doing that part. That's the one that goes, do we know this? Do we trust this? Do we want this? No. And then we have to have this, the front brain has to have a conversation saying, yeah, we know this. Yes, we've seen this before. Yes, we do want it.
Yeah, it's that way that the instinct kicks in and says, this is a really dangerous situation. And your intuition then kicks in and say, yeah, but that person needs our help. It's safe enough to stop back to help that person and then get out. So burning buildings and you go and knock on all the doors to make sure everybody's out the building first, or whatever the concept is. It's that initial instinct of, this is dangerous. So you're then on alert before your intuition kicks in or your rational mind kicks in, whichever way you want to put it, to then say, right, okay, so what needs to happen here? So I know that, yes, it's dangerous, but I can help that person get out. And if I don't help that person get out, it's going to affect me for however long afterwards.
So like when we talk about energy, like speaking to Tony's example there about how you had the energy healing done, the clearing of your chakras. So in the energy field, that the more you raise your vibration, it opens up all of your usual senses. So we usually vibrate between 63 and 78 megahertz as healthy adults. When we start to do things to raise our vibration and we start to progress down our spiritual path, that as we raise our vibration, we start to open up the senses in terms of we can see more, we can hear more, and they're in different frequencies because it's all about frequency. So much like, for instance, a dog whistle, right? We don't hear it because it's not in our regular frequency, but when it's going, we are reacting to it. Our body does feel it. We do have a sensory reaction. We're just not aware of it because it's not in the usual kind of frequency. So we can still be aware of it. So that kind of confuses it a little bit because if you're talking about like frequency, like a dog whistle, for instance, and you're feeling it in your body, does that become instinct or is that your intuition that's working? Because depending on the sense that's coming in, if it's a claircognizance, like what you were talking about, Angela, that just the knowing, then that's more of an intuition thing. If it's actually us opening up our instincts or opening up our senses to feel into the situation, does that then become instinct because we're actually reacting to the physical stimuli of the dog whistle happening? So there's that kind of thing happening too in terms of the energy. So Tony, for you, what I would guess happened for you is that you raised your vibration and it opened up. So you take away the dense pockets that are stuck in your field. All of a sudden you can feel all of that stuff a little bit more. And intuitively, it does increase that range of you being a receptor to guides, for instance, that might be speaking, right? Or you're just more open to get whatever information is around you in terms of your physical senses and your intuitive side.
It's kind of an instinctive thing as well about who we choose to work with. Mm-hmm. And if we are brave enough on occasions to tell someone that, they're not the one for you or you're not the one for them, and then send them to somebody else.
We have to resonate with them, right? Similar frequencies.
Yeah. But again, like Angela was saying earlier on, what happens if we know inside that we've got this instinct that, maybe this isn't a good idea. This could be an issue. This could be a problem. But then something else, our willingness to help, our need sometimes to help and well, maybe if we've got a little bit more testosterone, fix things, then that can put us into a really interesting situation.
But that's when we've got to look at, is it our need to help and our instinct and intuition to help, or is it our ego? Is it that other aspect of us that says, I can help everybody because I'm awesome and that's just how it goes? When actually you're not helping them, you're not helping yourself, you're doing damage potentially to your reputation and your business by taking on a client that doesn't resonate with you and isn't going to get any benefit from you. And it's understanding not your own limitations, but understanding your strengths and understanding where actually I know someone who's going to be a much better fit for this person. And I'm a big enough person to say that. So, yeah, for me, I think that's ego rather than instinct or intuition.
Yeah, so your
I
ego is
think
kind
that's
of
still a lot of
overtaking your
intuition comes into
intuition.
that as well. We're doing it because I do it quite a lot. I have a set thing that I do, and I've told you that before, that I've got 3 things that'll happen in the next half hour in the first call I have with a client. They'll tell me I'm not the right person for them. I'll tell them I'm not right for them as a coach. But what I will do is try and find someone who can. Or more than likely, as we will agree to work with each other, then we'll set a plan up how we're going to go ahead. But I always tell them, because I do trust my own instincts that way, that I will know if I feel right with the person within that time, that I can actually help them or not. And that intuition is something that dictates me.
That's what I mean, Tony. It's the fact that your ego's not jumping in and saying,
yeah,
I can fix you and I can do Leslie's comment that level of oomph. Well, I can fix you because I'm wonderful. And actually, no, we can't fix. Well, we don't fix anybody for a start, but we're not right for everyone either. And that's the beauty of this type of collective, is that as a therapist, as a coach, I now know Leslie and Mary and Tony and Tanys and everybody else that's been on these calls. So if someone comes to me and I think, actually, do you know what? You're going to get on so much better working with Leslie, or so much better working with Tony, or whoever else, then it's selfish of me to not say to them, this person's going to do you a much better service than I can.
Well, half of being smart is knowing what we're dumb at, right? So knowing what our strengths are.
Yeah.
Definitely stealing that one, Tanys.
Yeah.
And so many times we're told to work on our weaknesses. Why? Let's work on our superpowers. Let's work on our strengths. Let's work on those bits that we're good at to make them even better. And that might be part of that superpower, is saying, actually, Tony, as you were saying with that I just have a sense of knowing. I know that Mary's going to be a better person or a better fix than I am. Or it could be, I know that I can work with you and we're going to get some great results. It's that leveling up and really leaning into our strengths and our superpowers and actually getting stuff done.
It's being client-centric that way, though, right? Being client-centric.
Yeah, it's not about us, it's about them.
Yeah.
It's about them. It's definitely not about us. But one thing there, it was so kind of, and instinctively I jumped on it. It was the weaknesses. We as a species in the West tend to go there. There's this
predominantly women.
Well, yes, because we could be going into a difficult territory here, but basically,
I'm the only guy here if we start picking everything. Okay.
Okay, we know, we hear you, but it's one of those things that we as a sex basically have always been told that we are the weaker sex, when actually we are just as strong, if not stronger, than many of the opposite sex.
We've all got our benefits. We've all got our
benefits.
And the thing is that what you class as strength.
Yeah.
People talk about physical strength. Yeah, it may be certain men are more physical than certain women, but there's also women are more physical than men. But when it comes to
endurance, Tony, as well.
Not just that. Look at the room we're in just now. Look at the room we're in now. I've just said that before you say anything. Think about it. I'm the only male that's in here. There's 4 other therapists and healers in this room. So one thing it is about a strength is that I've noticed as I come into this field more than any, apart from the coaching side, but when I come more to the therapy, there's a lot more female than there is males. And I think it's because a lot of the males cannot judge themselves. They cannot look at themselves and be self-aware enough to admit the issues they've got to deal with that first of all, before they can start helping other people. And they won't admit that. So actually, if you look at that, 4 of you have got a lot more strength than most of the guys that I actually know, because they can't do that themselves, to look at themselves, never mind look at anyone else.
That's where I think we have different strengths, right? I think that there's different strengths among people, male or female. Different people have different strengths. I know a lot of very sensitive men that are quite self-reflective.
But the statistics show how many males commit suicide or take their own lives in comparison to females, because women are more prone to actually open up and do this. We'll talk to people. We'll do that. Whereas a guy won't, and that's why there's more. It's 3-1 still in the UK alone when it comes to that. That statistic's still horrific nowadays. That 75% of people take their own life in the UK are male because they haven't got the strength to open up.
I think it's part of that is that women are seen as being the bigger, community-minded and collaborative and opening up to talk, exactly as you're saying, Tony. And if guys have been brought up in such a way that, no, you don't talk about these things, and the other men are your competitors, they're not your friends, then it becomes really difficult. And when I first started networking for business, it was all about, we're all looking at competitors, and if you're part of this category, nobody else is going to come into this network meeting because you've locked that category down. I want to work with other therapists and coaches. I'm in my happy place when I'm collaborating, when I'm supporting, and I'm around like-minded people. So for me, I think whether that's a female trait or not, I don't know. But when we look at the statistics that you're talking about there, Tony, there is an element of that where men feel potentially lonelier because they're not building those friend groups, and the friend groups that they have are maybe not talking about the real issues.
Yeah, and I think the ironic thing is, if one of them opened up, they'd actually find the other ones all feel the exact same, but none of them will actually take that first step to actually do that. And that's the difficult thing. But it goes back to what we said earlier about the word instinct. It comes from caveman days, with the fear factor from fighting animals, and that still is ever since then. Males have had this thing brought down from generation to generation that you have to be the strong one. You don't talk about emotion. You don't show feeling. You need to be like a shield in front of you. And yet it's wrong. But it's still taking time with generation to change that, to come down, because that instinct in him is not allow their intuition to take over. That instinct is to hold all that in. So that's another thing, an instinct and intuition can be a strength and also a weakness at the same time.
So I would posit that the younger generations coming through are being encouraged to look more at their intuitions.
Much better than what it was in my generation.
But they're also being trained in a certain level to put their emotions and their sensitivities to one side to get stuff done. Balance. So if they're switching off their emotions, they're not able to label their emotions, they don't know what these different things are. You look at the different neurodiversities that are becoming more widespread, who don't understand what a smiley face means. They look at emojis and they don't understand them because they're not really properly learning emotions. Or is there more to it? I don't know.
And I think Angela, the challenge of that is that everything is getting more and more compartmentalized. So you could go here to this space and be emotional. You can go to this space and you're doing maths or you're doing problem solving. But the fact that all the emotions, are, and yes, are there times when that compartmentalization serves people? Yes, there are. And I do get that. But I think we're not balancing the skills well enough that it's actually both. They need to be. We are creatures of emotions. We have emotions, and we need to integrate it with the problem solving or the collaboration or the business networking or whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. Which I do find there've been some recent talks in Ireland. They were done on the basis of mental health with some of the big rugby, the main rugby players, the best known rugby players in the country, which is considered very macho. But when you get them talking about the emotions and the sensitivity of their family and having their families at the matches, their ability that it was integrated, the emotion and the match and the passion for the sport and the practicalities of training, the level at which they're able to articulate it, I thought was actually so rewarding because they were getting it. It was because they were combining the pieces rather than I have emotions off the field and I have no emotion on the field, or it just wasn't interesting. And I think that's part of its appeal too, that people were saying, yeah, the emotions it's everywhere.
We're the
There's
whole
such an
package.
We are.
Yeah. We're a whole
Yeah, but
package.
there's the big instance when we do compartmentalize like this, that there is a lot of falling between the chairs.
Yep.
So many people get lost down the back of the chairs, and that's got to do with medicine. It's got to do with psychology. It's got to do with everything. We're specializing too much in some ways and not enough in others. General practitioners are becoming a thing of the past.
Yep.
And yet it's the generalities in life that perhaps instinctively we should be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
In order to make things more adaptable, more accessible, people are going into their corners like a boxing ring, and they've got their gloves on and they're like, this is me, this is how I am. However, the center of the ring, where the actual exchange of the energy is going on, that's a battlefield. It's not a collaboration. Whereas what would happen if we came out of our corners and we went in and we actually started and said, this is how I feel. I think I can tell you how I feel. I don't really have the words, because we don't really get taught the words anymore. We don't get taught those words. We have to find ways of doing it. This is why emoticons have come, the emojis have become so big, because they show something. We're going back to hieroglyphics like they did in Egypt, basically.
Just
We're
about
going
to say that.
backwards. And it's one of those things that I look at these things, and I used to love Egyptology, and I was looking at it, and I'm looking at all these hieroglyphics going, you know, that's what that says. Where do you get that? But because they've also learned the language, and this is it. The written stuff is just as important as the spoken word. But the spoken word is what puts the emotion into it and the feeling and drives the conversation forward, because it's the emotional content of the emphasis on certain words and certain phrases that instinctively we use because we want to get that energy out to the other person to do the communication. And we talk about it a lot sometimes, because Angela will be saying something to me and she thinks I'm shouting at her, but actually I'm really frustrated with myself. And because I'm really frustrated with myself, I'm using my I'm frustrated voice. And it's very, very loud. And it's very, very short. And and it's terse. And there's a word for you.
Yeah,
But
so
basically,
interesting on that one, when I then give you it back in your tone of voice, you get really shouting, like, oh.
Yeah, I know, because because it's coming from me, and particularly on Zoom, etc. There's this thing where you don't realize that that's what's happening. I mean, when I was in France, one of my friend's now husband said to me, "Why are you so angry?" I said, "I'm not angry at you. Why do you think I'm angry at you?" He said, "Because you're shouting." I said, "Well, I'm shouting because I can't remember the blooming words, and I'm doing it in a language I don't understand, at the moment. So, excuse me if I get frustrated about
makes it
it."
make more sense.
It does. I mean, how many times have you? I know a 95-year-old at the time. She's long gone now. Governess who refused to speak any other language but English. And she would have the Italian bus coming in, the bus coming to Italy, going into Italy for the markets, etc. And she made that driver speak English. She made it happen. She went on there. You waved your passport. He knew that she was going to be there. She refused to speak Italian or French. And she got that guy speaking English by the time she was finished with him. That's an old-fashioned English person, definitely. That was an age gone by. But Tete, she was a character and a half. Very, very, very strong. And very, very authoritative. And I always wondered how she did that without actually raising her voice. But that was an instinctive thing that she had. And I think that when we examine our instincts and our intuition, we'll find that they kind of go like that. And one might be a little bit further forward than the other one day, and then the next time it might be the other one that's a little bit further forward. But we are animals of feeling. We are animals of consciousness. We are consciously aware of our reality. What we are less than consciously aware of, though, at times, is that we make our reality by what we do, what we say, how we say it, and what we mean. When we're silent and when we speak, that gut instinct that says, don't say it, don't do it. And then you get, hell, I'm going to do it because there's something that needs to change here. Or there's something that, I just got to get it out. I just got to go there. But it's one of those things also that talk therapy is really good for listening and hearing and emoting things. Because when we're there, what we are soundboards, and it's coaching as well, I would think, is the same. We're the sounding boards. And we're just going to reflect back to you what it is that you're saying so that you can hear it. And that little gut feeling inside is going to go twang and say, did I really sound like that? Is that really what I said? That's not right. So have a shot at it. And just think the next time that your buttons are being pushed and that things are getting a little bit, interesting. Is it instinct? Is it intuition? Or is it just time to take a step back? Which is possibly instinctive too. It's all about living. It's all about survival. But it's also all about thriving. So thank you, everyone, for taking part. And we'll see you next time. I'm not going to say good night because I get told that basically this could be anywhere in the world and it's not going to be night there. So it would be an instinctive thing for me to say because it is night here. But I'm just going to say bye.